Unit 2 begins with probability as expressing or modeling that probability with a Venn diagram. Venn diagrams are a better model when discussing experimental probability as opposed to theoretical probability. Students will have to make sure they understand the difference between and or. So when there's two options in probability, the and is where the circles overlap, the or is where they do not overlap. Also the discussion using the word neither. And then you'll have to basically have a discussion at the beginning of this asking the students what they know about Venn diagrams. And for the most part, they're going to talk about Venn diagrams are used in comparing two things, which is true. However, there are some pretty drastic differences when talking about using probability, because the kids, all they think is that you write a sentence in the Venn diagram of something the Declaration of Independence does that the U.S. Constitution does not have, and then write a sentence in the middle about what they both have. And that's all good. The basic concepts are the same. However, when talking about probability, now you're talking about data that's associated with one thing, data associated with another thing, and then data associated with both. So whenever they start putting numbers and data in the Venn diagram, it starts making it a little more difficult for them to comprehend and transition from just the comparison, a simple comparison, to discussing probability. So here we have a basic type of Venn diagram, nothing very specific, it's all pretty general. However, we have the components that you need to make sure your students understand. So here we have event A and event B. We have 8 that only operate in event A, 12 that operate in both event A and event B, and 17 in only B. And of course 9 here outside of that Venn diagram is neither. You also want to transition from the sentence, reading the probability sentence, to doing probability symbols, because the Dana Center goes from asking a question in a sentence to asking a question with just some pretty simple symbols. So here we're asking for the probability of event A. And then the symbols, the capital P outside of parentheses stands for probability, and the event goes inside of parentheses. So here, the probability of event A, the one thing kids will not do at first, or most won't do at first, is add 8 and 12, because those are in event A. That is the total of people surveyed selected event A. So there are 20 out of the total, which is all 4 numbers in this case added together. 20 out of 46. Simplify that to 10 over 23. And then you also here can have the discussion that you can simplify this or calculate it into some decimal value or percentage, where fractions, decimals, and percents are all valid ways of expressing probability. We have some more symbols here negating an event. So the probability that whatever you have is not A, this is called a tilde. So the probability of not A, you can calculate that. Anything up here that's not A is 17 plus 9. Those things are not A. Also, we have the probability of neither A or B given it's not B. Well, I've already talked about the tilde is not. And then the given right here is like a division symbol or fraction bar, because that fraction bar actually changes the denominator, what comes in the denominator of your probability. So what happens is what comes before it is your numerator, and what comes after it is your denominator. And the students will have an issue. A lot of times they will take the first and forget about that word given or that symbol for given, and then they will just take this right here, neither A or B, which is 9, and then go ahead and put it over 46, as opposed to whatever is not B, which is 9 plus 8. So the answer for this one here is 9 over 17, because these 17 are not B. The last thing that needs to be addressed and make sure that students understand is that when labeling your circles, you cannot have a circle for men and a circle for women in the same Venn diagram. It needs to be one or the other. And the reason is because right here when you compare when you have a survey where somebody answers a question, they select, are you a man or a woman? There's not a selection for both. There's not, this section right here doesn't even exist. And a lot of times, whenever you start talking about the categories in a survey, how do you set up your Venn diagram, your students will say, well, you need to have a circle for men and a circle for women. Well, what really happens is that if you have a circle for men, then that means everything outside of the circle is women. And they have a very difficult time. Several students in the last 7 years for my classes have had a difficult time understanding what's in the circle is represented by the title and what's out of the circle is represented by its counterpart, the other option available there. So if one circle is men, the other circle needs to be a different event altogether. So the example that comes to mind in the Dana Center, it asks about somebody who has a two-handed backhand swing in tennis. Well, so that's what the other circle needs to identify. What type of backswing do they have? One circle talks about their gender. Outside of that circle is the opposite gender from what the circle is labeled. And that's Venn diagram.